A few months ago when I spoke to him, he was a parliamentarian from the opposition. Now he is the Deputy Minister of Highways and Investment Promotion. A very good evening to you and welcome to Biz First in Focus once again, Mr. Ram Vikramratne.
Good evening.
Starting off, during my last interview, when I asked you, is the country on the right track in terms of the country's economy? You said, no, it is not. My question to you right now is the country on the right track after you all took over?
Yes, I think that before you talk about the economy, you have to look at what has actually happened. On January 8th, there was a change in this country. And people voted for a change in the president, and also they voted for a new program. People were expecting a change in the political culture of the country. I think politics, culture, social changes are all tied up with an economy. And I think that's what people are actually voted for. And if you look at it, in the very short period that we have been in office, 81, 82 days in office, we have gone about trying to make that change. It may be the simple things first. There was a culture of, extravagance, wastage, corruption. In the small things, we have started to change it. For example, if you look at the way politicians are moving around, highly excessive security personnel, the vehicles, the use of extravagant homes and official residences. The President has set a good example. The President himself, as you know, is not using his official residence. The Prime Minister is not using it. Ministers of the present government are not using it. And so there is certainly an example that's being set at the top for some simplicity in the way we go about doing our businesses. One of the changes in the new culture is the openness and the freedom. If one of us steps out of line, we make a mistake, we are not in keeping with the line I just described, it suddenly is very highlighted in the news and it becomes a big issue. So it's a change of culture. So what we are doing is, in the first few days in government, is we are setting the legal framework in place. We promised in our 100 days to create a culture of good governance, and in creating the culture of good governance, certain legal things need to be done. So, for example, we promised to bring a law to tackle corruption, which is to strengthen the audit processes. This law has already been drafted. It will be presented in Parliament within the 100 days and it will be approved. It is going to make the audit function independent of the executive. Then we promise to give citizens right to information. Any good governance regime, the right to information is an absolute necessity. And this is a legal right to information. That law is already there. We will present it in Parliament. We hope to have it completed in the 100 days. Then, if you look at it, we brought the Witness Protection Act to Parliament. And we have already got it approved in Parliament. It's the law of the country. That's nothing new. This law had been discussed for 5 years. There was a draft of the law. There was a government which had a 2/3 majority in Parliament. But they were not able to pass their own law. We brought the same law. We have got the law passed. So, when somebody sees something wrong, they're often reluctant to go and, make a police entry. They're reluctant to go to a court because they feel that if they go and provide information that they may not be protected. This law protects everybody who has to give evidence. If they are in any way threatened or any pressure is imposed on them, then those who do that, beware, because now there is a law to protect the witnesses. Then if you take something like the medicinal drugs policy, right? Senator Bibile came out with these principles 40 years ago. It's been debated in Parliament for the last decade. There was a law that was drafted. Maithripala Sirisena was the Minister of Health. That government had a 2/3 majority. They were still unable to bring it and get it passed. Our government, the United National Party, only has 41 members of Parliament. We brought it to Parliament. We've got the whole of Parliament voting on it. We put the medicinal drugs policy in place.
But one of the accusations leveled at the UNP-led government is the fact that your government does not have a vision for the country's economy, the forward march of the country. Agreed or disagreed?
I disagree with that. I disagree with it completely, because I think on the 8th of January, people voted for a change. And a change of necessity is a disruption. Because a change means that you had something in the past and you're trying to go in a different direction. And the intervening period is disruptive because you're changing practices, you're changing policies, you're changing people in the intervening period. And that's disruptive. And there's also a cleanup process. As I said, if you're comparing an 81-day-old government with a government which is 9 years, you're comparing a government which had a two-thirds majority and 161 members of parliament. The United National Party only has 41 members of parliament. And then if you compare the changes that we are doing, it's really enormous, the changes that we have done in a very short period of time. The economic policy, right, and the direction the country needs to take needs further changes. It needs a whole set of new reforms. And those reforms have to be undertaken.
The interim budget that was presented by your government, do you think that is the way forward? Or is it also something to please the people?
I think I'm glad that you said it was an interim budget. It's actually not even an interim budget. It's actually an amendment to the existing budget. So the former government presented the budget in Parliament. It was passed in Parliament. And what we did is, with the mandate that President Sirisena got on January 8th, we decided to amend that budget. We did amend it. And we made promises during the election. We made promises particularly on incomes, because we said government servants are underpaid, their salaries need to be increased by 10,000 rupees. We have gone and we have done that by giving them an interim increase of 5,000 rupees a month. We said we will bring the prices of essential food prices down, at least 10 items. We brought the prices of food prices down for 13 items. We promised to bring the cost of gas down of a cylinder by 300 rupees. We have done that. We promised to bring the prices of energy down, petrol, diesel, and kerosene.
I do agree with
that.
I do agree with the amendments that were brought forward, the prices which were reduced, gas and then petrol again, Deputy Minister. However, when you really look at the Colombo stock market over the last few days, especially after your government brought in this particular amendment in question to the budget, it has taken a downward trend. And when I spoke to several stockbrokers, when I spoke to several investors, they said that there is uncertainty in the Colombo stock market because of the actions of the present government, the super gain tax coming into play, so on and so forth. Can we sustain the country's economy with uncertainty?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is the stock market is not the only indicator of an economy. It is one of the indicators of the economy. And as I said, it's a period of discontinuity and change. And because it specifically referred to the stock market, there have been serious issues on the stock market. As you know, during the previous period, there were 2 Securities Exchange Commission chairpersons removed within the space of 9 months. It doesn't augment well for any country in the world to have your chief of SEC removed. And both people quit their jobs, saying that they cannot carry on the investigations and the reforms that they plan to do.
And you all got one of the SEC chairman to take up his post again a few days ago.
We did. And so one of the things that we are doing is there were several investigations there. And those investigations did not proceed. So what we have done is we are basically trying to re-establish. We have to re-establish. There are accusations, they need to be investigated. Everybody needs to come clean. There's no need for us to hide anything. So in a period like that, if you say that there is some uncertainty, I would concede that there is some uncertainty. But when you talk about uncertainty, it depends on what the uncertainty is and why the uncertainty is there. My view is this. My view is that if we clean it up, right, and we are very transparent about it, and we don't protect anybody, everybody is answerable to the law, and people see what we are doing, right, then the investor in the long term, right, will take a view and say, oh, this is a much more transparent stock market. there is no insider trading on this. We could rely on the information we get. We can rely on the authorities basically policing the market and putting things in place. So I would view the stock market, the process that's going on, that it will lead to that particular end, and in the long run, right, that what we are undertaking to do now would be correct. If you look at the people, we have appointed a former SEC chairman, and we have appointed other professionals and people who know about it. I think that people who really are looking at it closely are basically saying that we are probably doing the right thing there.
You said the government was appointed to bring in change and good governance.
Yeah.
On the 8th of January, the people, of course, voted in favor of President Maithripala Sirisena because they wanted change, they wanted good governance. However, you take a look at the activities at the central bank over the recent weeks, there's some sort of doubt. Your ministry wanted 1 billion Sri Lankan rupees to move forward with a highway project. The governor goes for 10 billion. This is on the 27th of March. However, this information was privy to only one organization. What is going on? Is this good governance?
I think the first thing I would say is I would contest the view that the information was only privy to one organization. When a bond is done as a public auction, it needs to be advertised. When it is advertised, it would be normal to give an amount that you would take and also give some indicative pricing, mention some indicative return. Now, that was done in this case, and it was a public auction, and then people...
Which was the 9.52% was the weighting average interest rate.
That's right. So it is normal that in a public auction, then people will bid. And when people bid, and you cumulate all the bids, it will come to some sum, and in good times it can be a sum which is far in excess of what...
There's always been oversubscription over the last few years.
There can be oversubscription.
This is the case.
Occasionally there can be undersubscription. Then if you go back and look at how these instruments have worked in the past, is that after that is known, you know the volumes, you know the prices it has come to. Then the Central Bank Debt Department, right, they have their own committee there, and then they would look at it and they would basically decide whether they are going to take the exact amount that they advertise or whether they are going to take something more. Now, there are enough and more occasions in which they have taken far more than they have actually advertised. It is certainly could be debated as to whether you advertise a 1 billion and you end up taking 10 billion, is that really
at 12.5%.
No, is the volume prudent or not? But I'm sure there are enough instances where you can show that they have taken 3 times, 4 times, 5 times more. So that question can be debated. But I think the point is that you take, right, sometimes a lot more than you actually advertise. The next point I would make on the pricing is that there is an indicative pricing, and generally the options will be given, right, for a decision to be made and said, at this average price, we will take so much. At this average price, we will take so much. At this average price, we will take so much. And then from one of those options, right, you will pick. I would say normally, coming from in my early years a trading background myself, you will pick one of those options depending on your needs you have and what you think the appropriate price is. One of those options will be picked. So that's how the auction would actually work, and it's a public auction. There's another way you can do it. You only pick that amount you need, and you can probably, if you need more money and you now know what's the indicative, not indicated, the actual price that the bids are, is that you could also go for some kind of a private placement in doing it. So that's also a possibility, and the central bank has done that in the past, gone for private placements as well. Now,
this is a private placement, is it?
This was not. This is a completely public auction where the prices are publicly available, and generally you bid electronically, so electronically the prices will be available. Now, when you talk about corruption, corruption could be present in any system. That could be present in any system. So That's why I'm saying that we need to understand that there are different systems in which. But this one was good in the sense that this was at least a public auction, all the prices are known. I think the question that has arisen here is that, you know, you have the father-in-law who is the governor of the bank, and you have a son-in-law who is basically has some interest in the company that has bidded on the transaction. And when you have a situation like that, you know, naturally there could be speculation as to whether there was self-interest in the transaction.
But the governor did accept that there was a communication gap.
Communication gap?
When informing the primary dealers about the 10 billion rupee offer that was in play on the 26th of March.
I don't know what the governor was actually talking about, whether he was saying that he only informed one company and didn't inform the others.
He did not say that he did not inform any company in question, but what he said was that he accepts that there was a communication gap. In an event like this, Deputy Minister, you have been a banker for many, many years before being appointed as a parliamentarian. In an event like this, what is the normal procedure? Let's take a bank for an example. You have an individual who is accepting that a mistake had been committed. Would you send him on leave, or would you interdict him, suspend him, and then an inquiry launched?
No, I think that there are several issues here. We won't normally interdict somebody unless we are very convinced that something wrong has been done. Certainly, we will want to make sure that the inquiry is independent, and the person we are inquiring into can't basically influence the inquiry. And so there are various things that could be done. One thing you might do in a bank is you might actually transfer the person to another area out of that line of authority. The other thing you might do is send the person on leave, so that the person is on leave while you carry out the inquiry. And in the very rare occasion where you have evidence that there has been some criminal breach of trust or something like that, you might actually interdict the person and then inquire. So various methods are used in banks, in companies, in actually handling this. In this particular situation, the governor himself has gone on leave and given a very clear indication, therefore, that the inquiry could go on independently.
Who would you appoint? 3 lawyers to investigate a matter of this nature, or professionals who could really get a feel of what the bond issue is all about? Because it's a lot technical rather than looking into the criminality of this particular transaction in question.
I have a slightly different view on this, right? And my view on this is people are focusing a lot on the technicalities, and I don't think this is rocket science. And the technicalities could be understood if they are explained to people. Clearly, you are right that every lawyer this may not be his kind of area of natural inclination.
And the Prime Minister appoints 3 members.
So it may not
from
be
the Lawyers Association of the United National Party.
So there are 3 lawyers, and maybe the composition could have been different. But I would like to say this, that there has now basically some doubt has been cast on the credibility of the Committee on Investigation. I would first things I would park that on a side, and I would say is a committee has been appointed, and in the past such things have virtually never happened.
But that's not the point. The people appointed this government for good governance, for a change. And it seems there's a repetition of what happened before.
No. Earlier, it didn't, the inquiry even didn't happen, and I'll explain that a little bit more. Earlier, even the inquiry didn't happen.
Inquiries did happen. The committees were appointed, Deputy Minister. However, there was no conclusion. And in this case, too, people think that a conclusion will not arise from this particular committee in question. And the governor will go scot-free.
No, I beg to differ, because I think even inquiries didn't happen. As I have pointed out, there's so many times that an inquiry, the SEC itself, inquiry, not only but the inquiry is closed down, the chairpersons who wanted to inquire were removed. I don't think there's a comparison even between the past regime and us. We may have our mistakes, and we are willing to admit our mistakes, and we are willing to correct it, but there's no comparison. We have set a committee. The committee's credibility has been called into question, but we have set a committee. Now, that committee's report, we have promised to present that report to Parliament. Now, because the credibility of that committee has been questioned, whatever the results of that committee may not be acceptable to everybody. Because that's natural, because they have already raised the credibility issue. So we are saying go one step further. Right? We are saying Parliament, and I have personally said this in Parliament when I was on the debate on this, I'm saying appoint a parliamentary select committee on this. You are the opposition, you appoint it, we are the government, we are open to a parliamentary select committee. We will support a parliamentary select committee on this because we want everybody to be satisfied as to what happened and did not happen here. And we have said that openly. In my 5 years of experience in Parliament, as a new member of Parliament, right, the former government, I mean, almost never agreed to anything we said. I only remember only once them entertaining an amendment to a bill that they had brought, and that amendment was something I suggested when they were trying to take the insurance companies and separate life insurance
Why
and general
aren't you championing
insurance.
this cause,
I am
Deputy
championing
Minister?
this cause. I am championing this cause even now. I am telling the opposition of this country, if you are not satisfied with the process that is in place by the government, set up a parliamentary select committee. We will support the parliamentary select committee. Go into it, present your report to Parliament, and when you present your report to Parliament, all the members of Parliament have an opportunity to actually to debate on it, for or against it, and then we can take steps that lead from it. So we are open on this, and this is not the culture that prevailed previously. We have made some mistakes. We will be ready to admit it. We will be ready to correct it. But there's a process. The process must be followed.
Let's deviate a little bit from the bond issue right now. Let's talk a little bit about development. People in Sri Lanka accuse now that development has come to a standstill. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah. I think the question is, what do we mean by development? I think I keep coming to that. I came to this question even before the elections, that often people, the way the questions are framed is people are thinking about, oh, if a road is built, that is development. And if that's what you mean, then I will answer that specifically.
During my last interview, you said that the Hambantota port and the Hambantota International Airport will be used by the UNP regime if they're elected to power. Now, you all have been in operation for the last 82 days or so, since the 8th of January this year. What have you all done?
Yeah, I'm going to certainly answer the question on development on the ports and the airports. But I want to go back to the earlier question you raised, and I want to just complete this point. So if there was a question on the bond deal, the question was to do with a conflict of interest. The technicalities can be argued both ways. We can look at it and we can come to some settlement. But there's a conflict of interest issue, right? That is the issue that we need to deal with. Now, that issue of conflict of interest goes much deeper than the issue in the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. This conflict of interest issue exists in our society, and we need to put paid to this. We need to have policies on conflicts of interest and how they should be handled. The previous regime completely ignored it. They never even recognized that there was conflict of interest. I was a new parliamentarian. On my first day in Parliament, I walked in there, and I was told that Chamal Rajapaksa was going to be appointed the Speaker of the Sri Lankan Parliament. I objected to it on the first day I was in Parliament. I talked to the new MPs in Parliament. I told the new MPs, how can this be? The younger brother is the head of the executive, and now the older brother is going to be made the head of the legislature. This is not on, because if you're going to have good governance, you need to separate the legislature from the executive and from the judiciary. You can't have two members of the same family. I used it as an example. I said I was the chief executive officer of the National Development Bank, right? And my wife is far more capable than me. She's far more educated than me. She carried away lots of prizes which I didn't carry. But even if she was working in the National Development Bank and I was CEO, there's no way that she could be the deputy CEO. It's a conflict of interest, similarly. But when that conflict of interest, the biggest conflict of interest ever to rise in Sri Lankan society, was when Chamal Rajapaksa was appointed Speaker of the House. That day, nobody spoke up. Not even the media spoke up that day. The difference is this. There is a change in the culture of this country. Today we are able to openly debate this. Even the central bank issue. even the conflict issue in the central bank. We are open to debate it. So I think we have a larger issue there, and we need to take notice of it. On the second question on development, I think that development is much wider than the whole issue on the roads. But I think your question goes to some of the projects that the previous government started, and you know what's really happening on those projects. Now, as I said, we are 80-odd days old, and there were questions asked during the campaign about some of these projects. Take the Port City project. Questions were asked about the Port City project. The tourism industry came to us during the campaign and they said, my heavens, if this goes ahead, our beaches will be ruined, hotels will lose their business, you know, there are environmental issues to do with this, will you look into it? We promised to look into it. We said when the change happens, we will inquire into it. So what is the first thing we did? I went looking for the information. Normally, if it's a foreign investment, the Board of Investment being the apex institution, has the information. They have the documentation. They will have the agreements. They will have the concessional agreements move through Parliament. They will have all the other approvals like environmental approvals and so forth. This was not there. I called for them, it was not there. We contacted the Ports Authority, asked at the Ports Authority. Arjuna Ranatunga said to me, he was the minister there, he said, Iran, there is hardly anything here. Even the people who know about this project are few. So it took a while for us to get whatever we could get together. The relevant ministers, the relevant ministry officials, the relevant institutions, Sri Lanka Ports Authority, Board of Investment, we got together. And then we began to inquire. Then we found out that there were certain problems. The cabinet decided to appoint a subcommittee. And
you all stopped the project now?
No, this cabinet subcommittee was appointed. When the cabinet subcommittee was appointed, it was decided on the information we had. No proper approvals, certainly no full environmental impact assessment study, that this project couldn't go ahead. So they temporarily halted the project. They temporarily halted it because further investigation needs to be done. We told the Chinese companies, if you all have documentation which is not in our hands, please provide it. Because we are not going to stop any project because the previous regime started it. This is about the country. It's not about a government.
So what's happening? What's the fate of the Hambantota airport? What's the fate of the Hambantota port? What's the fate of these organizations?
So in the port city, further investigation is going on. Our president has been to China. We have discussed it at the highest levels with the Chinese government. And we will go into it. And if it's the environmental studies, etc., show that this is actually possible to proceed with, and if it is beneficial to the country, we will proceed with it.
This is one project that
that's
you're
one
talking
project.
About. Yes,
yeah.
I'm talking about reference to your statement before.
Yeah, if you look at it,
if
you look at the Hambantota port, the Hambantota port project, not now. Even when I was in opposition, I said that that project has more economic logic than has the airport in Hambantota. We are looking at investment there to basically expand the use of the Hambantota port. And we will take that project forward because its primary logic is sound. Our objection always was, like in any investment, you invest in stages expecting a return. You don't put all the investments down now expecting a return in 20 years because then that investment is actually a loss. So that was our criticism. So we are building on that. If you take the Mattala airport, right, that the only way to regard the Mattala airport now is on the basis of writing off the investment and treat it as basically a buried investment because there is no fundamental economic logic for having put $250 million into it the way it was done. I went there myself. I've said this story before. I went there myself to look at it. That's the time I was threatened with a gun by the mayor of Hambantota. When I was there was an immigration officer lady. I went up to her and I said, ma'am, how many passports have you stamped today at the immigration? She looked at me embarrassingly and she said, only one for the whole day, she said. There is no economic logic there. So I'm saying write the investment off and we will find a way forward because then we are looking at returns on the incremental dollar on that project.
My final question to you is, Deputy Minister, Rome was not built in a day. On the 8th of January, when y'all took over the government, y'all promised a 100-day program. However, many accusations are being leveled, saying that y'all are protecting the corrupt, y'all are not carrying out with development, so on and so forth. I can give you a lot of examples as well, and even the budget. that you all have not been able to stick to your word. That is what the people are saying. Moving forward, is 100 days enough? Why did you all promise something if you all cannot deliver? What is the thinking behind this, Deputy Minister?
Yeah, I completely disagree with you on trying to put a negative frame on our 100-day program. You see, there's so many changes. I refer to the changes in the culture.
You did.
I refer to the
this
changes.
This is not reflecting the people's pockets. This is not reflecting the thinking of the people.
No, it is. If we communicate this properly, I talked about the change in the laws. We promised to abolish the executive presidential system, right? And
you brought a 19th amendment to the Constitution.
We have brought a 19th amendment to the Constitution. What is the 19th amendment to the Constitution doing? It's not abolishing the executive presidency, which the United National Party wants to do. But we have to remember that we need a two-thirds majority in Parliament to get that through. The 19th amendment is a collective decision of several parties. That's why we have brought it. But it's a significant step forward, because it's going to bring the term limits back on the executive presidency. It's going to reduce 6 years to 5 years. It is reducing the immunity that the president has, and he's losing his discretionary power basically to dissolve Parliament. For 4.5 years he can't do it. Only in the last 6 months that he can do it. So it's a significant step forward. What we are doing, this is a golden opportunity in the history of this country to push these reforms through. And this is for the benefit of the common people of this country. We must all get together and do this. After the general election, when we have a mandate given by the people, a new economic vision will emerge. We will reform the economy. We will reform agriculture. 10% of GDP contribution from agriculture, 30% of the labor force. We will improve the productivity of agriculture so that we can release these people to go into manufacturing, to go into the service industries. We will bring foreign investment. It will not be a debt-driven strategy. It will be an investment-driven strategy. Already there's a lot of interest. I returned from Singapore. We signed up APL Logistics, moving its regional office into this country. We signed up the third largest shipping company in the world, opening a shared services thing here. Fortune 500 company, already signed. Many in the pipeline. The framework must be done. Electorally, we need to have a mandate. We move the reforms. Within 5 years, you will see significant changes in this economy.
Mr. R. Vikramaratne, thank you very much for joining us right here on BizFirst in Focus. Words have to be put into action. The people are watching. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for joining us right here on BizFirst in Focus.
Thank you very much. Thank you.